Coming up on Terrified Nation, how fear disconnects us. It keeps us isolated and locked in survival mode, unsure who we can trust. But we are not powerless, and we never were. We are quite powerful as long as we remember that we are. In this episode of Terrified Nation, we explore the quiet courage that begins to rise when we stop letting ourselves be driven by fear. And this is how we recognize and take our power back, one grounded breath, one choice, and one connection at a time.
If you've ever felt fear, doubt, or despair about the future of our country, you're not alone. Terrified Nation is a podcast for those ready to face hard truths with open hearts. Hosted by Debbie Lynn Molyneux, each episode explores how we can move beyond division and build a society rooted in care, courage, and connection. If this resonates with you, hit follow and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Now here's your host, Debbie Lynn Molyneux.
Welcome back to Terrified Nation. I'm your host, Debbie Lynn Molyneux. And this season, we're exploring some of the deeper emotions that shape our lives. Fear, anger, and despair. Not to wallow in them, but to understand them, to figure out how we move through them without getting stuck. And from that grounded place, how we start choosing to do things that help both ourselves and others. So today's episode is about fear. And not only the feeling itself, but how fear is used to manipulate us, divide us, and distract us from noticing what really matters. And maybe most importantly, we'll talk about what it looks like to come back from that, to reclaim our peace of mind and our power that fear tries to take from us. So here's the thing. The monsters that we fear do not always wear masks and carry weapons. Sometimes they settle in slowly without us even noticing. And they grow in isolation, in the headlines we scan, in the social media feeds that we scroll. Fear lives in the stories that we hear over and over again. You know, the ones that make us feel like we don't belong or like we can't trust anyone who sees the world differently from ourselves. And because we're human, we start to believe those stories. Fear reshapes how we think, and it filters what we pay attention to, what we ignore. Fear narrows our perspective until people who used to feel familiar, like our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, suddenly seem like threats. And that's exactly when fear becomes useful, not to us, but to someone else. Because a fearful public is a pliable one. No one outsmarts their survival instinct. No one. And when we're afraid, we react. And we shrink. And we retreat. And then we're much easier to control. This isn't an accident. Divide and conquer isn't just a wartime tactic. It's a political strategy, a social one, an economic one, and it works. All it takes is one issue, something that is so personal to us, it hits close to home and we cannot ignore it. One issue. So pick your issue here. There's immigration, guns, abortion, masks, gender identity, charter schools, taxes, Israel, climate, vaccines, pronouns, student loans. The list goes on and on. You get the point. You can pick a passion and get fired up and choose a side. And while we're busy fighting each other on this one issue we can't ignore, we are unfriending our cousins or reposting outrage, clinging to our righteousness, And while we're doing all of that, someone else is making decisions about our lives and our communities and our future. Meanwhile, we're so focused on our one burning issue that we stop noticing the power we've given away. Until one day, something shakes us and we pause. And we look around and we think, wait, how the hell did I end up here? That moment of clarity, it can hurt. Because we see it clearly then, how our fear has been used against us and how we have clung to ideologies that pushed away people we love, and how we bought into a way of being that asked us to shrink or split or sever connection just to feel safe. And the truth is, we have all done it out of loyalty, out of exhaustion, out of habit. We didn't always know that there was another way to be brave. But noticing, that's where it begins. The moment that we realize we gave up our power, that isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning. Because now we can choose again. Here's the exciting point. Courage doesn't show up with fanfare. And it rarely arrives like a superhero that crashes through the ceiling. Courage shows up in subtler ways. It slips in through the pause or the breath, the honest conversation, the willingness to try again. And it shows up when we choose not to hit send on that snarky message. It shows up when we pause before reacting, when we open up to something that's unfamiliar and a little scary. Courage shows up when we remember that even our small, imperfect actions, they matter. They matter a lot. So maybe courage for you looks like texting someone that you haven't spoken to in years and seeking to reconnect. Or maybe it looks like inviting a neighbor over and that turns into an annual block party where everyone is connected. Maybe it looks like showing up at a meeting when you'd rather stay home, or making space for someone else to speak. Whatever it is, it does start small, but it grows. And then one day we find ourselves wondering, now that I have my power back, what am I going to do with it? And that question can feel big, even overwhelming. And the answers are deeply personal. But before we jump into the doing, let's try something different. Let's pause. Let's slow down to the speed of humanity, to the speed of trust, and to the speed of care. Because in a culture that rewards speed and certainty, slowing down itself is a courageous, radical act. It's how we start hearing ourselves again and how we remember what matters, how we decide which stories that we want to keep and which ones it's time to release. I think of a few small moments, like that time outside the grocery store, and there was this young man sitting quietly by the door, and I heard him kind of mumble something as I walked past with my ear pods in. But something nudged me. So I turned around and went back, and he had asked me for food, not panhandling, like give me cash so I can go buy drugs. He was hungry and he wanted breakfast. And I had something to share, so I did. That moment reminded me that power isn't always about making big impact. Sometimes it's just about presence and caring for someone who is hungry. Or there's another day when I realized that, and this even sounds silly to me, but I realized that my anger had been what I used for fuel to make changes in society. And I'd been doing it for years. This kind of righteous anger that flares up when the world feels unfair. but it wasn't helping me anymore. It was burning me out. And I remember this moment from childhood where we had a thing where sitting at the table, I was learning how to chew with my mouth closed. And my stepfather would squirt me with a water gun to remind me to chew with my mouth closed. And it just felt so unjust that I would be treated like I'm trying to eat and there's this water shooting in my face. And that's where it kind of first started. This memory of righteous indignation started when I was like less than 5 years old. And I had used that fuel for decades, but it didn't have to define me going forward. And so I let it go. It doesn't happen all at once, but there's a decision that gets made over and over again that becomes a new habit. And it makes room for something else, for something deeper, for something more durable and sustainable, something more joyful. Or there was another spring a few years ago during the pandemic when I started gardening. And I really didn't know much. I have a black thumb. But when I saw these little seedlings straining against the edges of their little tiny starter pots, I got it. They need more space. And so do we. We cannot grow in a healthy democracy in rigid containers that are built for control. Controlling the populace is not a way to strengthen democracy. We need fresh soil and room to spread. We need shared responsibility and mutual respect, collective care. And the good news, that shift is already happening. Not in kind of magical viral moments or sweeping legislation, although there's certainly been some of that. But for us, it happens in quiet, private choices. It's how we run our businesses, how we parent, how we respond to when people challenge us, like uncomfortable challenge, the one I'm talking about. How we respond tells us if we are choosing relationship over rules. And we can start reflecting on, all right, who's in a controlling place and who's in a connection place? Like, what's our orientation to control and connection? So in decision making, control says, I will force others to comply. And connection will say, I want to understand what really matters to you. In a community, control says, if you break the rules, you're out. And connection says, hey, if something is broken, let's fix it together. In success, control says, I will win at any cost. And connection says, I can't win unless everyone does. Oh, this is not easy work, but it is beautiful work. And the reward I have felt for me is a life that's rooted in connection, not in constant reaction. We were not meant to live in survival mode. We are meant to live in relationship with ourselves, with each other, with the earth, and as our home, right? There's no planet two. So if you've been feeling brittle or afraid, or like the world just doesn't make sense anymore, you're not alone. And consider this podcast your invitation to pause, your invitation to breathe deeply, fully breathe, your invitation to listen. Your courage is still here, and your power never left. It's just been waiting for you to remember. And now what do? The question becomes, what will you do with it? Will you use it to build something new? To offer shelter instead of suspicion? Maybe to plant something in that fresh soil, not just for you, but for all of us. Because the shift is already underway. And despite outward appearances, It's not being led by the loudest voices or the biggest whatever. It's being led by people like us. And we've got this. Now, if this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone and start a conversation. Leave a review because it helps others find their way here. And we'll keep walking this road together. Join me next time.
That's Terrified Nation, a podcast from American Future. If this episode moved you, please help others find it. Leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. For early access to new episodes, become a paid subscriber at terrifiednation.com. Join us next time.